But what do you think about the George Soros appointed district attorneys? Do you think that they play a role in allowing a lot of criminals to be let off for a lot of the violent crimes, for a lot of the, some people say petty crimes? But I think there might be a correlation with a lot of people being sent off while they're committing hard crimes. Meanwhile, political crime, I would argue, is being prosecuted very heavy-handedly, especially if you believe in the wrong kind of political ideology.
Yeah, I
want to jump to a story here, actually, because this is a really, really crazy tweet I saw from Mike Cernovich.
Oh, yeah.
Cernovich says, Judge Amy Jackson released a J6 defendant from pretrial custody after he disavowed Trump in a letter, and his lawyer suggested a political conversion. I've never seen anything like this ever. So here's a guy who's been in jail now for, going on 9 months? Mm. And there's been horrifying conditions. There's a guy whose hand was broken. They didn't give him medical treatment. A judge held the warden and the director
warden, yeah.
and the director of the Department of Corrections, I guess, got held in contempt. And now they've seen the writing on the wall. Disavow the politics you previously supported, and they'll let you go.
We call this re-education.
Right. Mm-hmm. This is the state of our current political and law enforcement environment. If that's the case, I think we are. Are we already beyond that red line past the Rubicon?
Yeah. September 11th and the Patriot Act was the red line. When they signed the Patriot Act, they crossed the red line.
There's a lot of stuff that happened throughout history, though. There's a lot. That's true. I think that was a major turning point, but there were other things that you could say crossed on the Gulf of Tonkin crossed the line.
They can arrest anyone at any time with the Patriot Act.
Then there was the
and
NDAA.
detain you indefinitely for no reason. What? That's insane.
Well, there you go. I guess they're doing it.
Well, I would just kind of go back to the point. What do you think about the kind of prosecution of political crimes while George Soros's appointed AGs usually let a lot of criminals off?
Yeah, I mean, I think the progressive prosecutor movement, it's harder to track what's going on. One of the reasons you're able to criticize people are able to criticize cops so effectively is because big city police departments release a lot of information. DA's offices are not actually that transparent. Like some of these progressive offices are getting a little more transparent, which is nice because you can see where they're not prosecuting Larry Krasner, not pursuing gun crimes in Philadelphia, for example. It's hard to figure out what the impact has been in the short run, but I suspect in the long run, like, petty crime will flourish. If you look at a city like San Francisco, what has happened with shoplifting there is clearly in part a byproduct of the state's decision to say that theft under $950 will no longer be treated as felonious theft. It's partially a product of decisions by DAs like Chesa Boudin to say these offenses are not a serious issue. These minor offenses. And this goes back to the point that I was making earlier. It's like if behavior is perceived as socially deviant in certain ways, then it's considered acceptable and not deserving of punishment. If behavior is perceived as, I don't have a strong opinion about this particular case, I don't know all the details, but I think it is certainly true that people can be prosecuted, if not by the law, then certainly the court of public opinion for opinions which are not deemed acceptable by the mainstream media, by public commentators, in a way that they are not for doing things like petty shoplifting across, running a shoplifting ring across San Francisco.
I think a lot of cops are also disenfranchised. I think there's a lot more of the blue flu going around than we even know about. I think that's one of the reasons. But also, it's kind of understandable because a lot of these cops are like, okay, I booked this guy, I risked my life to put him in jail, and then he's just let out the next day. What the hell's going on here? Why should I even risk my safety to do this again when everyone also hates me? So I think there's an element of this that should be talked about and considered.
When you talk about something like bail reform, and they're better. I think there's a strong argument that cash bail is not a great idea. That you shouldn't be let in or out of jail because of your ability to pay, as opposed to your risk to society, which is something you can do. But you look at New York State's original bail law, which rather than assessing risk, just sort of released people, create a strong presumption of release for many classes of offenders. And the effect was you were seeing guys get picked up and arrested 20 times and they were out the very next day. And it's like, you're right. What is the point of running a criminal justice system? And my colleague, Rafael Mangual at the Manhattan Institute likes to say, criminals don't specialize. The guy who is getting picked up for jumping a turnstile or public indecency. He's the same guy who thinks it's cool to jack a car, and that's the same. There's a terrible case in San Francisco. Guy was out on bail, thanks to Chester Boudin, stole a car, should have been in prison, should have been in jail, and ran over and killed 2 pedestrians, an old lady and her daughter, her niece. It's a horrible case, and what happens is that criminals don't specialize. The guy who gets stuck in jail for one thing if gets let out, he is often the guy who goes on to commit a more serious offense.
Either there are powerful elites that know they're burning the country to the ground, and they like the fact that many of these leftist and establishment Democrat types are too stupid to realize what's going on, or they're all really stupid and just marching in lockstep because they're not smart enough to realize they're burning the place to the ground. You look at the policies in these cities with these Soros DAs, and they're like, I'm going to release this violent offender, and then he kills somebody, and it's like, well, who could have seen that coming?
I kind of agree with you, Charles, that there are like 2 types of people, one that respects the law and one that doesn't respect the law. But then I see people like Julian Assange and Edward Snowden, who they made specific crimes that you got to wonder, is that law just that they violated? Like, was Hitler's restoration of the professional civil service of April 7th, 1933, which excluded Jews from civil service, was that a just law?
I mean, no,
it wasn't.
I like Jews being the civil service.
The criminals that violated that law weren't the kind of criminals that would mug someone necessarily.
That is, sure, and even not Nazi Germany we can create unjust laws. We live in unjust laws now. I think so. But like part of the principle of living in a republic is that we don't get to flout laws that we don't like. Right? Like we live under we have some agreement. I think it is. Like, it's not necessarily that everybody's malicious. It's not necessarily that everyone's stupid. It's like, I think about the mayor of Seattle, Jenny Durkheim, I forget her last name, who looked at the Chaz Chop Zone and was like, this is the summer of love. Like, these people
Until they went to her house.
The people who are getting shot and murdered in New York and Chicago and Baltimore are not the people who are running the city. 90+% of homicide victims in New York City every year are black or Hispanic. They're not the people who are running. Eric Adams is a black dude. He lives in New Jersey, but he is a black dude. But generally, he's not coming from the context of the people who are getting shot. So I think a lot of it comes down to sort of abstraction into political ideology. It's like, I believe that these people are at the center of systems of oppression, so I just need to sort of liberate them from this. It's like, nah, these
I don't
people
think it's
get
that
shot at every
genuine.
day.
I don't think it's that loving and caring. These people don't live with them. They're not in the same communities, and I agree with that particular point. But to think that a lot of these people making these policies are not seeing the effects of them, I think is not a realistic point. I think they know exactly what they're doing. I think it's leading to a system that they want, a situation that they want that has people fighting each other, arguing with each other. It has people unhappy, has people unhealthy, has people being victims of crime more than ever. And I think that benefits a system that thrives off of that. And I think I would argue that rather than I know what's right, I'm going to help these people. They pretend to say that, but at the end of the day, they know that they're not doing that.
I don't like that small group of representatives are in charge of making the laws anymore. It doesn't seem right with 350 million of us that have access to the internet and doing this together, that we've given it up the power to like 600 people. It doesn't make any sense because you see these bastardized laws that they're creating and enforcing, and like the NDAA, they can just grab someone out of their house and stick them in Guantanamo for as long as they want. That's not
when they
justice.
when they took what do they have, like a red a Red Ryder little wagon with 5,000 pages for the omnibus bill, and they're like carting it into the Congress, and they're like, nobody read it, nobody's gonna read it, let's make it a law. That's a functional system right there, huh?
No, it's not.
Thank you.
Good point, Idiot. I appreciate that. But I think there's a bigger conversation to be had here because when we look at the statistics, especially within the last few months, the people are getting screwed over here. People are getting hurt more than ever. People are being victims of crime more than ever. People are becoming more unhealthy, more unhappy. They're getting robbed economically every step of the way here. And a lot of this comes from a lot of these politicians saying, I'm going to help you. They're not helping you. They know they're not helping you because look who's benefiting off of this. A lot of multinational corporate elites, a lot of billionaires who are raking in record profits while everyone else is having a harder time making it by.
To be fair, I mean, you can just follow Nancy Pelosi and buy buy the stocks that she buys.
Yes.
Right? And come on. When all this went down, It should have been obvious to everybody that you could just buy the stock for Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson, Moderna, Amazon. Walmart's private, though. Walmart's not publicly traded. I think it's private. You could have bought Amazon stock. That went through the roof. So, of course, it was benefiting the billionaires, but it was also benefiting the millionaires.
Yes.
Yeah.
See? So if you were a millionaire, you were doing all right. Oh, you guys are talking about working class people. Oh, yeah, the working class people were screwed completely.
I think sort of my response to that point is, so like, this is not the worst violent crime has been in the United States, right? There's a for viewers under the age of 30 who do not remember, I'm under the age of 30, but like for viewers who do not remember the 80s and 90s, homicide rates were substantially higher. Violent crime rates. You couldn't walk through Times Square in New York City because it was like a den of prostitution, sin, and iniquity.
Well, hold on. Do you know why homicide rates were substantially higher before 2007?
Why?
Cell phones, or lack of cell phones. So, one thing that needs to be considered that when it comes to tracking the homicide rate is that once cell phones became ubiquitous, violent crime that resulted in death became violent crime that didn't result in death because people could call 911 immediately, whereas before this, they would rush to find a phone. And so what ends up happening is there's an illusion that there's a major drop-off in violent crime when there isn't. It's the same. There's a similar level of crime. It is going down.
Yeah, but so the violent crime rate declines substantially from 1994. The homicide rate falls from about 1989. And actually, there's a leveling off around the Great Recession in the violent crime rate, although not in the homicide rate goes up and down.
That actually meant that violent crime was skyrocketing, right? So I'll put it this way: homicides changed because of cell phones into attempted murders. And so you had less people dying that substantially changed the nature of how crimes were being reported. So when you look at the Great Recession, it's like, oh, it's flat. Actually, people are surviving the violent attacks.
I mean, you would expect an increase in the aggravated assault or violent crime rate then, which doesn't happen. I mean, I believe in improvements in trauma medicine, and so there's a great you look at what's his name. Steven Pinker.
That it could be that people weren't reporting the crimes.
Yeah,
and if there's a corpse on the ground, it gets reported.
Yeah. So I mean, homicide is sort of the historically most reliable indicator, right? Because there's a corpse on the ground. But like, we can plausibly compare the 1990s to the early 2000s. We say that violent crime is substantially lower. You can quibble about like what the direction of that is, with the magnitude of the change, but it's definitely down. The point that I wanted to make is that like violent crime rose in the 60s and the 70s. I think largely for ideological reasons. All of the same ideas were in the water, that we should convert, that the criminal justice system should be primarily rehabilitative, that cops were violent and dangerous and racist, and that they needed to be like frankly, they were more violent and dangerous and racist than they are now. Like, cops were way worse 50 years ago than they are today, 60 years ago than they are today. That what we really needed was like a more therapeutic state that like looked after everybody, and these ideas like had enormous currency in the 60s and 70s, and there was a retraction of criminal justice capacity, there was a retraction of policing and carceral capacity, and the result was predictable. Like, these ideas go in and out of fashion, they come in and out of style, and I think that they're coming back now.
Thanks for checking out this segment from the Timcast IRL podcast. If you want to watch live, you can check out this channel Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. Now, don't forget to smash that like button, subscribe to this channel, and if you want more unfiltered and uncensored content with all of these guests, go to timcast.com and become a member. All of these guests you know and love in exclusive segments on our website where we are unrestricted in what we talk about, so you'll definitely not want to miss it. Thanks for hanging out. We'll see you all next time.